Yes.
What do you got?
Sorry, I'm just tying my shoe.
He's tying a shoe, everybody. Colin's topic, tying shoes.
Right.
Damn it, Colin. Every time I get to your topic, I have to go to the bathroom. Excuse me.
It's okay.
Coming back. Oh, listen. I'll pee with the door open like I did last time we were talking.
We probably shouldn't do that.
That'd be fine. I'll do it right now.
A little more serious is shifting gears kind of topic. I was just thinking about, we don't talk a lot about, I talk a lot about politics.
Yeah.
And I never really got your guy. I don't really know. I know you a little bit better than I did in terms of politics.
He's talking to me.
Greg. But with Tim and Nick, I don't really know you guys in terms of how you feel about certain issues. And I was thinking about this the other day. I'm glad I remembered it because I often think of topics and then just don't remember them.
Write them down.
That's too hard.
Use your notepad.
That's too hard. I thought the best way to examine this was to kind of withdraw myself from the question a little bit and ask you guys a very simple question, which is how much government is too much government or enough government? In other words, what do you feel like the role of government in your life should be? And what are examples of what it does right and what it does wrong? And I thought that by understanding these things better, that I would then understand you guys better about how you feel politically, because you're not...
Can't wait for Tim's answer.
because you're not really... I don't want to say politically conscious, because I think everyone's politically conscious in some way. But everyone has I think politics... Let me put this a different way. I feel like politics has become an unsavory thing for a lot of people to talk about, which I don't agree with. I fucking hate avoiding politics and political conversations. I love them. I think it's important to have those kinds of conversations. And a lot of people are just like, yeah. But I think that it leads to a false conclusion that people don't feel politically. And I don't think that's true.
I see what you're saying.
In fact, I don't think Tim doesn't feel politically. I don't think you don't feel politically. I don't think Nick doesn't feel politically. I don't think you guys maybe think about it. But I think that, like, if someone were to ask you a hard and fast question about it, you would have an answer. And so that's my question.
Okay. Tim?
I will be the first to say I am very uninformed about all of this. And
Who's the president?
Barack Obama.
Okay. Where was he born?
Not the slightest clue in the world.
Hawaii.
He was born in Hawaii?
Yep.
There you go.
Show me the birth certificate.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is, I know that before I did this show, I was way less informed than I am now. I feel like talking to you guys, I kind of have at least somewhat of a grasp where if people are talking about stuff, I can kind of maybe every couple sentences add a line in there and not sound too stupid.
Okay.
So I'm like, you guys are educating me. So there's definitely some growth. That's good. In terms of the question of how much government is good, I don't really know. I often get really deep in my thoughts and I start thinking about like why the fuck we even listen to the government. And it's like, why are red lights? Like, why do I need to stop a red light? I didn't sign up for that. You know what I mean?
Social
like,
contract.
It's just a weird thing where it's just like, so just because I was born here, I need to like listen to these rules. It's a good thing the rules exist. But I often think about that. I'm like, all right, it is a good thing, but why am I forced to do it without wanting to? And it's like, is that why we work though? And I start going down that path and I don't have any answers.
Well, the idea, what you're talking about is the social contract. That is just a thing, like an amorphous kind of thing, saying like you agree tacitly, whether you want to or not, to obey the laws and go to jury duty and shit, like, whatever it is, like
Jury duty.
But like, I'm interested with Tim with this specifically. Like, do you think? Let's just ask specific questions.
Yeah.
Should the government have a large standing military?
See, here's the thing. I feel like I have answers, but then they're answers that have absolutely nothing to back it up. So then it's like someone could easily change my opinion on it so fast if they just gave me any insight, really.
What is your first
It's like,
instinct?
should they have a
large
other
standing
people,
military? Because other countries have, you can call up like reserves and stuff, but we have a very strong standing military.
I mean, I feel like a standing military is like, you need that, or else you're just getting a bunch of random dudes.
Yep. You don't want these flabby folks out there. Not
Yeah,
trained.
like, I don't want us to be
I
in
agree
the
with Tim on
military.
this one.
That'd be bad.
Do you
Standing military.
Do you think the
Well,
government?
I wouldn't be because I'm way too old.
Yeah, I mean,
you guys
we're
would.
past the age. Although
You're-
if a
if
massive
they-
world war came out, we would all fight.
Oh man, I would gladly go fight if it was something that was a good cause. But I'm 35. They would not take me. I don't think.
No, well, they might, depending on how crazy it was.
Depending how deep down the offer the line had to go.
Do you think that the government should give the less fortunate money?
See, this is something that I have thought a lot about, and it kind of bothers me that we create situations where we favor certain people over others. But this is one of those things where, as I've learned recently many times, as a straight white male, I have a warped perception, and I'll never understand other perceptions. So therefore, I'm speaking from a point. I don't want to say of privilege. I don't want to say of not privilege. Just from a point that isn't the other points. So I'm not those people.
We're gonna do so good at this debate.
It's
It's gonna be so good.
I mean, this is literally like the
perfect
worst scenario for me, where I'm just not informed on this shit.
I feel that question's too vague. I think we would need to go case by case, not case by case in terms of like literally everybody trying to apply for Section 8 housing, but I mean
this is one of those things where the reason I kind of went down that rabbit hole is because I'm connecting this to other issues that I've spoke about with people recently, where it always bothered me that like schools needed to have this many Asian people, this many like people from Mexico, this all these like random like weird things where it's just like this many people that lived in this district,
like an affirmative action kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly, and like all that stuff. I'm just like, what the fuck? Like, people just let people be equal. Like, it should be a merit thing completely. Like, if you get into a good school, it should be because you're good. And it's just like, that's kind of my stance on it, where I'm just like, put your blinders on. None of that information matters. That checkbox, male or female, does not matter for what we're talking about here. Like, if you're applying for a job, it doesn't matter if you're a woman or a man. You're applying for a job. But then it's like, all right, I can't say any of that because...
No, but you can. But you're allowed to, because, and here's why, and I'll back you on this, because you strike me as the kind of person that doesn't let anything stand in your way of your success. And that is a different mentality to what Colin's talking about, or Colin's sort of eliciting from you, which is there is the more conservative take on things, which is like you should get what you earn, and if you can't earn it, you don't deserve it, right? Versus a more liberal stake, which is the more fortunate should help the less fortunate, and therefore uplift the entire society, right? And I don't know that you can be. It's very dangerous, and I think what you're talking about is very dangerous. Talking generalities when you talk about anything, because the more general you speak, the easier it is for someone to come at you with a harsh criticism that you can't defend.
Yeah, comments.
Colin, I mean, I think you and I are very similar in that I err on the side of being more conservative than not most of the time. Socially, I'm very liberal.
Me too.
But as far as finances are concerned, as far as money is concerned, I'm very conservative. It strikes me as hilarious when you watch people like Chris Christie enter the race, where he has such interesting and polarizing views on a lot of different things. And that's one of my biggest problems with politics in general, especially when you start talking about politics, is that when people... Well, let me back up. In regards to government, it's dangerous when you start when you start taking on these issues, because largely when you talk about government, it's when they're doing something wrong, right? Yeah. How often in your life do you think, God, I'm so damn excited that this road I'm driving down is smooth, right? You don't think that. You're like, God damn it, there's a pothole in this road. Where the fuck are my tax money? Where's my tax money going? And so it's difficult because, I think there are a lot of departments in the government that are bloated and bureaucracy doesn't run well. But we never take a second to be like, what actually does work in this country?
That's an interesting point.
What does work? Having said that, I think we spend way too much money on the military. I think we spend way too much money on a lot of social programs, and I don't think there's a lot of
space travel.
No, we don't spend
that
nearly enough money on space travel.
It's a long time ago.
That's
last
true.
time the internet hated
Damon
me.
bust through the wall.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, how dare you? I think, like anything, with any organization that's that big, it's just so hard to scrutinize and really have control over where every dollar is going, right? And also I think the bigger problem politically is that we just have the way our system's set up is that it incentivizes politicians to stay in power, right? And that's a big problem. When a politician is more concerned with getting reelected than they are with actually forcing social change, that's a systemic problem. That's an issue. That's a huge issue that we face every day, every day. Especially when it comes to the president. It's the most powerful position on the planet, and a year into the presidency, they're already starting to plan their reelect campaign, right? It's like, what are you going to do? How are you going to be effective?
Term limits.
Yeah, so it's difficult. I listen to you talk. You do sway me a lot often when you speak, because you make a lot of sense. But you look and our priorities are so damn far out of whack, especially for this country, especially a country that's supposed to be the leader in the world. Oftentimes, it's hard to just tackle any of these issues.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, again, I don't want to interject myself too much into it, but it's like the because I'm kind of curious where you guys stand on these issues. But yeah, I when I was thinking about this question, I was like, this is a fundamental question that can elicit a lot of information out of a person about how they feel politically, even if they really don't know how they feel politically. I think less government is more government. I think that like less government is a great thing.
Yeah.
And I think that most fundamentally, and I think this is maybe where my historical knowledge and my appreciation of history comes in, is that it is also an homage to the way it's supposed to be. This country wasn't made to morph into something else entirely. This country is a constitutional republic predicated on the same set of rules that we were predicated on in 1783. So that's the kind of like that is the difference between what they call strict construction and loose construction. Strict being, the Constitution is not a living document, which means that you can rewrite it or reinterpret it.
Sorry, I think I said Chris Christie. I think I meant Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz is probably
That's
but
what I
Chris
meant,
Christie
sorry.
will enter the race.
Yeah.
Chris Christie is my dude. I mean, I like Chris Christie. But, the one thing that frustrates me, because you were talking about roads and all these kinds of things. This is the one of the thing where I get really mad and where people interject themselves into political conversations they really have no business in because they don't really know what they're talking about. Is when people are like, "Oh, you don't like." Whenever I complain about taxes, like fucking inevitably,
Roads.
whenever I complain about taxes, they say two things. Oh, you don't like the police? You don't want the police and the fire department, and you don't want the roads? And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? When someone's complaining about the income tax, they're complaining generally about the federal income tax, which doesn't pay for your roads and certainly doesn't pay for your police department or fire department. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So like when someone makes these, like steps out and starts making these kinds of arguments, like you just don't even know what you're talking about. Like don't even talk because you don't have any idea what you're saying.
What does that pay for?
Most of the federal income tax, you include FICA, goes to Social Security, Medicare, and the military.
Yeah.
And then like,
well, isn't it like 50% goes to the military?
It's a very high number. Our military is cost as much as the next 10 militaries combined, including China's and Russia's and everything.
That's just,
hey, there's a reason you're drinking that coffee.
Why? Because
freedom.
That's not.
Have you forgotten?
I don't think you can equate the farming of coffee in third world countries to freedom.
I'm pretty
sure this is not fair trade.
And that's where like I think people kind of lose sight of things. And this is a very liberal kind of thing where they lose sight of what really costs money, which are the social programs. That's why I asked Tim if he believes in just the fundamental. Fundamentally, do you believe the government should be giving transferring wealth, right? And my answer to that is sometimes it's okay.
Sure.
I believe, for instance, in unemployment insurance because you pay for it. That's what a lot of people don't realize. Is like you are paying for unemployment insurance. When people so I remember someone saying a long time ago, being like, "Oh, so you wouldn't take unemployment?" And I'm like, "No, I paid for it, so yeah, I will take it." It's the same way I feel about Medicare and Social Security.
Yeah, people equate unemployment to welfare.
Exactly, but it's
in
not.
their brain, it's synonymous. It's not.
It's an insurance policy that you have paid for.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that it should be extended indefinitely, like what Obama and the Congress did after the fall in 2008 or whatever. Like they just extended. Some people are getting unemployment for 2.5 or 3 years. That's too much. Like that's a step too far. Half a year, get back on your feet, whatever. That's fine. I don't care. You paid for it.
Yeah.
But it's the same way I feel about Social Security and Medicare. I don't believe fundamentally Social Security and Medicare should exist. Like,
well, they won't for a long time, so don't worry about it.
But they exist, and I've been paying for them. So, like,
sure.
I'm just being honest. I'm saying, like, if they exist, I will take from them because I fucking paid for them. I mean, a lot of people say Ayn Rand, for instance, who's like the arch libertarian, got Social Security, but she paid for it. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like it's a different thing to say like
Social Security is more like a 401k, right? Where you're actually no. The way Social Security works is that we are currently paying for the people that are currently getting it, right? Isn't that how that works?
Yeah, it's a trust fund based on you put the money in that the people take out. And
it's sort of like a pension. It's sort of like a pension fund for government workers.
It's just not going to work.
Yeah, it's not going to work. It's going to go bankrupt.
So it's just I fundamentally.
The problem is people are living too goddamn long.
And this is what I
kill the old people.
Well, that's
Am
a
I right?
That's a problem.
Centennial
So
man.
now we're making sense.
Just putting it out there.
By killing the old people?
Yeah, for Kevin.
Well, that makes sense to Kevin.
Circle.
But that's the thing.
Kevin's
that's the thing
eyes just
that's
burnt out
interesting,
dead
Nick,
bodies.
is that even talking about raising the retirement age is like a third rail. Like you don't do it, and that infuriates me because
that's absurd. Though.
It is absurd because everyone's like, well, let's raise it 18 months or something like that, and I'm like, let's raise it 10 fucking years.
First of all, show of hands, and I love the idea of retirement. We're in a different world than most people because we can continue to do this job and derive pleasure and grow with it for the rest of our lives. Like we are, for all intents and purposes, Greg, you're the front runner on this, but you are getting paid to show up and be yourself. Yeah. And like, do you ever see a point in your life where you're not going to want to do that? Maybe, but for the most part, if you're wildly successful at it, you're probably going to want to keep doing it until the day you physically can't do it anymore.
Right.
And I want to keep doing this.
And even then, you're going to make a couple more movies.
Yeah, why not? I mean, I've said it before, but I read a lot about cinematographers, right? And cinematographers have this crazy tendency to never quit. And they stay sharp because the job demands it, right? And so you'll see these guys like Roger Deakins or like Bill Pope or any of these like the older cinematographers who were like, I'm forgetting like the oldest one. It doesn't matter.
The guy that does The Godfather is like really old, right? Or
well,
did
he died, unfortunately, Gordon Willis. But he was old. He kept shooting until well into his, I think, 70s or 80s. And then these guys just keep going because they love it. And to them, they don't need to work anymore. And they can just, they do. They keep getting the jobs. I'm like, I'm not going to turn this down because I fought so hard to carve this out for myself that I'm never going to let it go. So it kills me that I just don't think about retirement as a thing. I don't ever, like, God forbid, I hope I never have to retire. Because to me, retirement is synonymous with no longer having that sort of ambition or goal in my life.
Synonymous with the end.
And filet of fish sandwiches.
And
I'm in for that.
And
though.
jorts.
Yeah, and jorts.
All
And
right.
jean shorts.
Man, sounds kind of awesome.
So I think the answer we like, and this is what I appreciate, and to my point about people talking about things they don't understand. I try to withdraw from conversations generally, unless I'm trying to annoy someone that I don't understand. Right.
Sure.
We had that example when Adam Sessler was on. You guys were talking about comics, and I just stayed silent for the entire thing until the end when you guys asked me like questions that I could answer. There's a problem, I think, and why I respect the way you guys, especially Tim, where he doesn't want to talk about it because he feels like he doesn't understand it, is that some people can take a hint from that. You know what I mean? Like, do your due diligence and work and understand what you're talking about, and then we can have a rational conversation. Because I can have a rational conversation all day about the income tax, and in fact, there are people out there, very smart people, that would be able to convince me, or not convince me. No one's gonna change my mind on that, but like can make a good point on why something like that should exist. But when I put something out there and everyone's like, do you like your roads? It's like, do you have any idea what the fuck you're talking about?
Do you like your
Right.
Even a little bit?
Right.
Because, like, I believe in the 9th and 10th Amendments, states' rights, states can tax you all they want. I have a problem with the federal government taxing you and that kind of stuff. So, like, there's a nuance to it that can only be appreciated when you step back and understand the situation as it is and not just talk. And that's what a lot of people do is they just fucking talk.
Know what you don't know.
Yeah, and know that there are things that you don't know. That's I always say that, and that's a more important thing.
Well, and I think the especially hard too when a lot of people like to have severe negative reactions to things, right? People like that. They derive some sort of validation and pleasure from it, and it's very dangerous when you see a headline or you watch Fox News and the sky is falling all of a sudden and you just jump on that bandwagon. And it can be very addicting, right? A lot of people like that. They like to feel political by just respouting something out they read or they heard, and they think they're informed. And it's not, because oftentimes these are incredibly complex issues, right? And politicians have to boil them down into one-liners because that's how they have to communicate them to people. Because let's be honest, most people don't give a fuck and they don't really want to pay attention.
No, and I'm also going to settle up at politicians so you understand the issues too. The big thing to me is that I just get so mad about the way people talk about politics, and so I have a deep appreciation for the way you guys talk about it in the sense that it's a little more reserved. I put in the time and effort to understand it, and so I talk about it like I do because I fucking do.
Well, it's a passion for you.
Exactly.
Yeah, and let's be clear. Let's also be clear about a couple other points, right? When we say when I say things like our military is too big and things like that, I am in no way, shape, or form criticizing our military.
No,
right? If you are currently in the military watching this, we all of us, I think, unanimously appreciate what you're doing for this country. Same with the police. Same with the fire department. Any service of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel that personally. I think that's inherent. You shouldn't. That's the fear culture, right? That's taking over, not you, but just generally, where it's like you have to say that. Of course, we're not criticizing men in uniform.
Right.
We're saying that the military is fucking massive.
Massive. And it's in places of the world that it does not necessarily.
No, it's a legacy. We're in South Korea, we're in Japan, we're in Germany. Think about all the places we fought in we're in the
Cuba,
in the
we're in
Middle
Turkey,
East.
we're in
Yeah, it's just like we don't need, like, to me it's like not even about uniformed military men. It's about like let's just go to a more isolationist the way we
I'm gonna float this at you. Thing. I mean, where should we have military
in the United States?
Opinion? That's it.
Yep.
So you don't think we should have any? We should shut down all of our foreign bases?
Yes.
And pull back from the Middle East completely.
Yes. Here's the thing about this, right? And this is
I'm not saying this being antagonistic. I happen to agree with you on this.
And this is kind of a kind of an aggressive thing to say, but this is the way I feel. If there's some reason in the future, there's some future war, and we have to go back to Europe, guess what? No one's gonna stop us.
Yeah, we have the best air force.
We'll take what we need, but like we're in Ramstein and all these places in Germany as a legacy of World War II. It's fucking over. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we're in Japan. The Japanese do not want us there.
We still live in that.
And like we are still there. There's tens of thousands of Americans in Japan that are not wanted there. And like it's not that they're like tourists. It's not like they live there.
Yeah.
And like they're just I understand staying there in the 50s and 60s. Like that makes sense. But like eventually the occupation must end. So it's like when people are like, well, what if something happens in the Middle East and we have to go back to Iraq? It's like, first of all, we probably shouldn't be sticking our nose in Iraq. If we really need to go back there, guess what? Like we can probably make it happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and think about the money that you save
But I think
in the meantime.
But
and the lives that you save.
The issue is everyone. I mean, I think a lot of people know that we don't necessarily need to be there, but there is that fear, that culture of fear, where we're like, what if?
Take our eyes off them.
What if Iran fires up the nuclear program? They don't disarm like they're supposed to, and like all of a sudden they start threatening nuclear war with their neighbors,
Israel will take care of them before we even have to worry about it. That's the other thing we don't think about with that.
Right. I mean, and then there's we've got Russia breathing down the neck. Everyone's worried about we're going to lose any sort of gains that we've had since the Cold War, and Russia's going to just come steamroll and start taking over lands again, things like that. But at the same time, my thought is beat them with the economy, beat them where it matters most, right, in their pockets. Like, pull out everywhere we don't need to be, take all that money, and for the love of God, invest it in some sort of alternative fuel source that could make this country thrive again and be world power again. Not that we're not a world power, but
we had a big force field. They couldn't touch us.
But I think so much of it, and this is where my education starts to falter a little bit on the subject, but I think so much of it is driven by fossil fuels, is driven by oil, is driven by the fact that we are so still dependent on that, or feel that we need to be dependent on that.
Well, the Middle East, certainly. I mean, I don't think it can be any more obvious. I just feel like we are too in everyone's business, that we don't give ourselves enough credit that if we were an isolationist country, like a straight up isolationist country until World War II. We got into World War I like very late in the League of Nations and all that shit. But like we mobilized after Pearl Harbor, and it took us time to like get into the group.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone forgets that we didn't fight the Nazis for almost 4 years after Pearl Harbor. You know what I mean? So it was like it took us time. We had to deal with Japan first, then we went into Europe. The point is that if we have to fight, those were existential wars, right? The Japanese attacked us. The Germans had declared war on the United States. And things could have gone differently, but they didn't. And those were the most existential wars we've ever fought, with the exception of the Civil War.
Right. And
we still figured it out, and we won. You know? We did that with a military that wasn't all over the world. And with a military that wasn't like on its feet. And it was and that is the greatest generation, and that was the beginning of the war machine that we have now. And we can still maintain the war machine. We just have to have respect, I think, for other countries' sovereign status, and also the respect for the people in those countries, and the respect for ourselves that like the World War II is over. If you're worried about Ramstein going away and then something happens where NATO has to get involved in Europe again because the Russians do something, we'll just go back. Like, it's not a big deal. The Germans aren't going to say no. You know? Like, we're here to help.
It's a different world than it was back then, too. There's a world economy now, and it doesn't behoove any of us to go out of business, per se, you know? Like, no one's... I don't know. I don't think a lot of people are going to be wanting to start shit with us.
No, I don't think
soon.
they're not going to, because they're
similar
not going to.
We're not going to want to start shit with China ever.
No,
we're not going to win that. So why is that even a thing?
That's the thing. Is and that's the thing is like people won't.
They fund everything. They own everything anyway in the United States right now.
That's true. I mean, we owe them a lot of money, but like China's economy is also very fragile. Here's the fact of the matter: is like no one's going to mess with NATO, and no one's going to mess with the United States. They're not going to win. So like. They're just not going to win. If there's one thing the United States has, and Western Europe has shown in World War II and stuff, is it's just incredible willpower. And we had all these stupid fights in Southeast Asia and stuff, in Korea and Vietnam and stuff, but that we totally had no business, and we lost. We haven't won a war since World War II because we haven't fought a war that was worth fighting since World War II because we had no will to fight
a war that was winnable.
We won the war on terror.
Yeah, right.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, everything's great.
Knocked
right
that
now,
out of the park.
Syria and Iran and Libya, everything's good over there.
Yeah, ISIS, great guys.
ISIS.
But glad they came about.
So back on the topic, like to me, the answer of how much government is too much government is it's not a question of conservatism or liberalism, which I think a lot of people think it is. It's about like specifically with a scalpel figuring out like what makes sense and what doesn't.
Yeah, but
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
How are people going to ever do that though? That's the thing. We can do that sitting here, but it just seems like in Washington it's impossible to affect change. It just doesn't happen.
It's impossible because of gridlock.
Yeah, but that's the problem. That you have to solve that, right? And I think the biggest issue there is that people they don't necessarily want to make decisions that change things. Because if you do that, then you put yourself on a limb, and you have to fight it, and someone's just going to come in and veto it, or they're going to knock it down, or it's not going to get pushed through Congress. It's not going to push this. It's never going to happen. Like all these things, or they tax so many goddamn extra shit on top of bills that it just weighs it down.
Yeah, the pork is out of control. The
pork barrel spending.
Pork is things you add onto a bill, like just random things. Like you pass a farm bill and you have like a bridge on there somewhere that someone's going to pay for too. That's called pork. The fact is that you have to like people. I was curious about you guys' answers to this question, just in the sense that what makes the most sense, and not to put yourself in like pigeonhole yourself into like, well, sure, I'm this way and therefore everything has to be this way. I believe in a small government. I also believe that the government, as I've said before, should fund the arts and should fund space travel and should fund things that like make us a society.
Well, I also
things that define us, and they're cheap. That's the other thing everyone forgets. Everyone's like, oh, what about the roads? It's like, hey, just close all those bases down overseas, and you can pave every fucking road in the United States 5 times. Yeah. You know what I mean?
That's so it's like San Francisco then.
That's like how expensive like what we're doing over there is, and people don't have a relative knowledge and understanding of like what that means. That like having a base with 30,000 troops in it is not the same as paving a road. That like one requires quartermastering basically like logistics and all these kinds of things, and the other requires just paving a fucking road for a very nominal fee. So for me, it's like, like protect your parks and do all those kinds of things. Anyway, I was just curious. When I was thinking about that the other day, I'm like, I know how Greg feels, and I think I've had a pretty heavy influence on Greg, but like, I don't know how you guys necessarily felt about it. And I thought that the most appropriate way to approach it was to be like, how much is too much government? And that basically pigeonholes you, at least in a place on the diagram where you can then like kind of work your way out. Because if someone asked me only social questions, they would think I was a Democrat. But I'm not.
They would think you're a hardcore liberal.
But I'm not. I'm not a Democrat.
Same with me, though. I mean, if you ask me, like, should the government pay for it? And obviously, it's all subjective. We're all different people in different parts of our life. Like, people that are watching, some are well off. Some people are just leaving college, don't have any money. Some people have been in business for years and are doing baller. You ask me questions like, what should the government pay for? And the first thing that pops in my mind is healthcare. I think we should have universal healthcare. I think it's deplorable that healthcare in this country is in the current state that it is. And we quote unquote have Obamacare, but we all know it was an interesting, eye-opening experience leaving a corporation that gave us healthcare and getting a healthcare policy that really doesn't cover shit and costs a ton of money, relatively speaking, per month. Like, you guys probably haven't had to use it yet.
I used my dental. It worked.
Yeah, it works.
It worked.
Well, good.
I had a $30 copay, but it worked.
That's fine.
I got my bill yesterday. It didn't work. I gotta call them.
Yeah. So you got to be really, really careful because these policies that look great on the onset, which are part of this Obamacare movement, don't really cover a lot of things, and you can't really find the right doctors for a lot of things. And this is a really interesting experience. Whereas it shouldn't be that way. Like, the number one thing you shouldn't have to worry about is if you're sick. You shouldn't have to worry about how you're going to get better and who's going to take care of you, because the fact that is a market that's basically another free market where people are allowed to bill you for every single thing when you're fucking dying, I think is deplorable, personally speaking. And that's someone I can afford it. I can afford things. We're not dying. We're living relatively well as far as, the support we've gotten from our community and what we're able to pay ourselves. But at the same time, it just is terrible to me that we have the world's largest standing military on the planet. We've got the best Air Force. We've got all these best things, and we've got the fucking worst healthcare. The worst.
Yeah, it's funny because that's another good example of, like, because I'm a conservative, people would assume that I'm against universal healthcare, and the fact is I'm against it because I don't think it can work. I'm not against it on a principled level. I used to actually be really against it on a principled level, where I'm like, I don't think the government should be involved in this at all. But as I've thought more about it as the years have passed, especially since Obamacare passed in 2009, I mean, I remember watching that Obamacare vote. I watched it, like, on C-SPAN live happening. It was on, and I remember being like, "Fuck," you know what I mean? Like, I this is bad, not because I don't believe in, like, what they're doing, but you can't take a half step, which is what they did. They're basically saying, like, well, we're going to use the private companies to give healthcare to everyone, and that doesn't work. So I'm not against the government doing that. I don't think that it can work. It's the same thing with the military, where it's like we're talking about the military being all over the world. It's like, I'm not against the military being wherever they want to be. It's just like, does that make any sense?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like that's exactly. So it's just like on a case by case kind of basis. Anyway, I don't want to bore everyone. I just thought, that would be an interesting kind of off color topic.
The serious topics, Colin.
Yeah, and to talk about, because I like talking about those things, and I also think it gives, we have a lot of foreign viewers that I think that, from Western Europe, from Australia, from Eastern Europe, from South America, wherever, where they don't think about or talk about American politics. And I like to try to give them a little insight into, like, why I feel a certain way, because I kind of feel like a Republican or a Democrat are cartoon characters to foreigners, because of things like the Daily Show and stuff, where it's like, well, you have the fucking bleeding hearts and you have the fucking rednecks, and it's like, well, that's not really the way it is.
But they are cartoon characters, and here's why. I heard a news. Ted Cruz just announced his candidacy, right?
Yeah, great.
And guess what? The first three things that I heard. This is going to a news clip that someone clipped out and chose. It was NPR chose to share this with the world. But he says the following, and I'm paraphrasing: America's ready for truth. America's ready for honesty, and America's ready for change. How many fucking times have you heard that from a politician? Every single time it's the same shit, and it never changes. So of course that you're gonna look at it from an outside view perspective. You're gonna look in and go, these guys are fucking crazy.
Yeah,
They're
bring
just saying
something
the
new
same
to the
shit
table
over and over again.
Like
It's
love.
nothing ever changes.
2016.
I'll tell you one thing right now.
Yeah,
No one's run on love.
No one.
Because everyone's afraid of it. I'm not afraid of love. I love you.
I love you.
I love all you guys.
Good.
I love Kevin. I love his little nasty fetishes. I love everything about him.
To your point, I think what it's going to take to change that is, and we almost had it in '92, was a person completely outside the two parties winning the presidency. Perot. And Perot got close. And if he played his cards right that summer, he would have won. And that's because people have, that's the thing that we always forget about. Like, we act like the two-party system is like, people have been disenchanted with the two-party system forever. In fact, the founders didn't want parties at all.
Yeah.
And didn't really fundamentally realize that, like, by not having a party, the original two parties were the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, because it was basically like the Federalists and then just the people that were not the Federalists. Mm-hmm. And that is the beginning of the two-party system. So it's just a fundamental thing of any republic has parties. It's just that we only have two. Now, some people look at that as, we have more than that, but those are the two major parties. But it's always been a problem. And it's going to take someone from the outside to shake it up.
Yeah, but how will they be effective? If Perot were running right now and he got elected, would he be able to affect any change?
Probably not because of Congress. But people also have to understand that the Senate specifically was designed to be slow and to fucking stop everything from happening. That was the idea. Mm-hmm. You know, we have a bicameral legislature. That's an intentional thing. Otherwise, we would just have a people's house, which we have, but it is offset by what was supposed to be representatives of each state, which then were just elected officials anyway. People forget that too. Senators
stay in power forever.
Well, senators were originally appointed by the state governments. So like it was supposed to be like a people's house and then the houses that represent state interests. And then eventually the Senate just became another house with just longer terms. Anyway, yeah, I like talking about those kinds of things. I would talk about that kind of stuff all the time. But it's always nice for me to know, for you guys to get a little insight into the way you feel. And to give people out there a little insight into the way we feel, too. Because I don't want us to, or me, to come off as a cartoon character to people that might not know our system well or just hear me in terms of my tweets and stuff like that, but to get a deeper understanding of the things that frustrate me and the ways that government can and cannot work. And it's funny because I consider myself a Republican and a Libertarian, but it's the fact of the matter is I kind of just chart my own course. And I encourage everyone to do that as well. You will hear very few Republicans be like, let's give money to artists. Yeah, very few Republicans be like, let's increase NACHA's budget 10 times. You know what I mean? Or because it's not necessarily about the money, it's about how you're spending it. Mm-hmm. And man, if you cut that military budget in half and you raise the retirement age 10 years, you're going to have a fucking surplus of money. And if you're really smart, you'll do that and keep taxes at the same level and pay down the fucking debt. Which, by the way, is almost $20 trillion. 20 trillion. Now, to put that into context for you guys, the government takes in about $3 or $3.5 trillion a year. Mm-hmm. And they're still spending more than that, and we owe $20 trillion on top of it.
Mm-hmm. And we have no water.
This goes in. Yeah, we have no water in California. This goes into another topic, which we'll get to in a while. We touch on it every once in a while. How deeply and fundamentally fucked we are. It's something that I'd like really like to talk about, like in the fact of like why, like it's not an apocalyptic thing or anything. It's just like what is the real reality of like the situation. We should talk about that one day. Mm-hmm. About like what is the reality of having no money. About being like, about being Rome, basically, when it's falling, which is basically what we are right now. Mm-hmm. And Nero's just fiddling everything, and Rome is on fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's another topic for another day.
Another day.